Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show for July 17th, 2019. No name, no pun this week. We're just going to play it cool, play it easy, not be too wacky, not be too wild, and just have some really down-to-earth, cool, calm conversations about personal computers and the video games we play on them. Join us. In these discussions, and you can do that in the Twitch chat. You can do that at club.pcgamer.com if you want to join there and hop in the Discord and get us some questions, or just hang out and listen. Joining me today, Steven Messner, senior reporter. How you doing?
Hello. Hi. This is a very calm version of the podcast. I like it.
Pretty calm and cool.
Yeah.
Laid back.
Yeah.
You might say down to earth.
Yeah. I feel like we should have some smooth jazz playing delicately in the background.
I could probably make that happen. Stay tuned. Also with us, Jared Walton, senior hardware editor, and I would say the token wild boy this episode.
I don't do calm. I am always loud and angry. I taught James everything he knows about swearing.
It's true. I learn a new word every week. About hardware.
Today's new word is agisa.
Agisa? What the heck? You just make that up.
What's agisa?
AMD, I actually need to look it up. It's like AMD generic something. We'll just move on.
I look away from the hardware page for like 2 minutes, and there's a new term or two, and a new card, new CPU. Agisa.
AMD generic encapsulated software architecture.
Okay.
Oh, I hate that it's an acronym.
Oh, of course it's an acronym.
Everything's an
I guess
acronym.
it has to be.
We won't stay too calm throughout the show. Just wanted to set the mood right. We're going to talk about some cool stuff today. We're going to talk about Final Fantasy 14, the 14th Final Fantasy.
For also the 14th week in a row.
True.
I'm pretty sure we've talked about Final Fantasy.
Yes, but we have a new context this time.
Yeah.
Over the last week I've played probably like 35 hours of Final Fantasy from the beginning. Final Fantasy 14 from the beginning.
My boy.
I'm gonna do it. But we'll dig into why. And Steven, you just finished up Shadowbringers, so
Yeah.
perfect kind of two points of entry to talk about this game within. So gonna be fascinating.
We're going to calmly meet in the middle and discuss views respectfully and calmly.
Down to earth opinions here on the Computer Gaming Show. We're also going to talk about this, and we'll have in the middle segment is where things are going to get off the hook. Jared's just going to rail on and on about AMD's new hardware lineup. There's a buttload of new products. Looking at the notes here, so I'm looking at 5 new CPUs, 2 new APUs, 2 new graphics cards, and 3 if you count the 50th anniversary edition. So Jared's going to translate.
Yeah, I've got NVIDIA cards too. I've got 3 NVIDIA cards.
Oh my gosh.
I can talk about too.
Okay. So
They're
it's going to be
super.
hardware nonstop for a bit there. It's going to be,
Turn your acronym filters onto high.
yeah, pretty much. And then we'll wrap, bringing it down, playing around in Steam Labs. So Valve just put out, I think a week or two ago, Steam Labs, which is sort of their experimental arm of Steam, where they're going to try new things before just deploying them outright. And there's a pretty cool recommendation engine we're going to play around with live and see what it recommends to us and whether we think it hits the mark or not. It might take a couple episodes to actually prove it, but it's going to be fascinating, fun toy to play around with. Then we'll close with listener questions, as always. But before we do any of that, let's talk about our highlights of the week. And our highlights of the week are anything that happened in PC gaming, anything we saw, played, anything in the news, anything related that we think is worth sharing. And why don't we start with Jared?
My highlight was Prime Day.
Prime
That's all
Day?
I've done this week. No, it's not really a highlight, but there were some people that were complaining. They're like, "Oh yeah, they just mark up the prices before marking them down and stuff." I was like, "No, actually, that's not true. I put together, and it's no longer available. But I put together a PC build that was like a Ryzen 5 2600, 16 gig of RAM, 500 gigabyte M.2 NVMe SSD
Okay.
case, power supply, and a 2060 graphics card, all for like 600 and I think it's 650 about.
Woo!
And like it was 370 for just the base, everything minus the graphics card for still a pretty high end system. So I was like, it's probably about $150 lower than you would find the same price, same parts today. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
pretty cool.
That's rad. Yeah, it was those 2 days blurred by. It was kind of
Yeah.
prime day. It was prime deals all over the website because there was a lot of good stuff to share. But we're back to normal now.
I also played Griftlands.
You played Griftlands. You played a video game. What's
Yes,
Griftlands?
I got the alpha. I don't even know the history of it, but like it was demoed on the PC gaming show like
right.
2 years ago.
Something like that, yeah.
Anyway, it's sort of a card game that I'm not a big collectible card game guy, so I have no idea about card games in general other than I played this one. It's kind of fun. It's a drawn aesthetic, so cartoony, but not super like graphically intensive. So I could run it at 4K even on my lowest end hardware.
Heck yeah.
But it was cool. So it's an alpha, so you couldn't like play the whole game, but I beat it.
Oh, shoot.
I beat. Well, I went through the story arc that was available.
Oh, okay, so
I
it's
only
not like
died
done. It's still
it,
in progress.
it's sort of like it's like a roguelike in some sense that there's repeatability. So like
Okay.
you can die and then it gives you an option where you can like restart the past day, but you can only do that once per day. So if you die and then you die again on that day, then you have to restart the game. So I died on 3 different days, but made it through barely.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can do like restart, but you keep a couple of cards or something. I don't know. It was interesting, and I mean, like I haven't figured out the mechanics, but I did restart playing it after beating it, and it's weird because the deck I had was super good at negotiation. And then I restart, and it's like my negotiation deck sucks. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait, I can't negotiate
Right.
anymore.
You have to kind of adapt.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you don't know what Griftlands is, listeners, I don't quite know either, but it's Clay's new card game that doesn't just card art is like RPG sort of too. So like you don't just use cards to battle.
Really?
You use cards to like have conversations as well.
Yeah,
and,
so there's a battle deck and there's a negotiation
That's
deck. And they're totally separate. And you've got health or HP for your battles, and then you have what's it called? It's not confidence, it's something else. Resolve. Resolve is
Gotcha.
your negotiation hit points basically. So if you get down to 0 resolve, you can no longer debate with people or negotiate with people until you rest. But yeah, it's fun and kind of a clever little game. And you get the grifting part is you can get these graphs that permanently alter your character throughout the game. So one might be like, hey, every time you every time you play a battle card, draw another card, or something like that.
So you get some pretty interesting chains going on if you have the right deck. That's rad. Yeah. I think we've been interested in that for a while, and we put up some hands-on from I think Jody McGregor looked at it, so I'll share that in chat. But
he knows more about it than I do, I'm sure.
it's got a cool look, and I'm really curious to dig in. I'll probably wait a little bit just because I'm not huge like early access type of person. That's Griftlands. I think is it Epic Store exclusive though? Is that the case?
I got it on the Epic Store, so I would assume.
I think that's the only place I play the alpha right now. Okay,
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks for sharing, Jared. What about you, Steven? What's up?
Oh, hi.
Highlight.
Okay, my highlight of the week is Final Fantasy 14 related, but it's not just talking about Final Fantasy.
Okay.
I wanted to call it this amazing story.
Oh, I know what you're
because
talking about.
the Chinese. Yeah, okay. So in China right now, there's a Final Fantasy 14 promotional event going on with KFC. Again, the ongoing legacy of KFC trying to court video gaming is hilarious to me.
Yep.
But this promotion was if you ordered basically their family meal. You got this promotional code that you could redeem in game, and it gave you this fat chocobo, which is like the little bird things that all the Final Fantasy characters ride around on, like as if they were horses. And you get this really fat, chubby one, and it's really cute and adorable. So naturally, everybody wants this thing. But here's the funny thing about this promotion. for one family meal, which serves 4 people, you only get one code. So if you want that code, like if you and 4 of your friends want these codes, you have to order 4 family meals.
Good
And
God.
so it's created this amazing like social media sensation on China's social media networks, which are different than ours, of people basically posting their attempts to try and consume this ungodly amount of food. We have the list here on the article, but it's 1 double chicken burger, 1 vegan mushroom burger, 1 5-piece chicken nuggets, 2 original recipe chicken, which I don't know what that means. Like what? I'm not a KFC guy. I don't know how much chicken that is.
Sounds
I'm
like a lot.
assuming that's not like a
chicken.
It's just 2 pieces of chicken. That's what I figured. 1 2-piece New Orleans chicken wings, 1 old Beijing spicy duck roll, 2 Pepsis large, and 2 oolong teas large. That's a lot of food. And so people are buying this for the code. I don't know why they didn't think this through. Like the person on the one hand, like the part of me that's like, hey, we should not create more food waste when you know half the world is constantly having to fight to eat a meal. Maybe we shouldn't encourage this sort of gluttony. On the other hand, it's very funny to watch these people posting their attempts at doing this. So we have the article. I'm not sure, James, if you dropped it in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, you did. It's just really funny to go through and see all these things of people attempting to try and do this and like posting photos of their attempts because you're eating a meal that's designed for 4 people just to get this code for this chocobo. I wish it was in North America because I would have 1000%
would you
patronize KFC.
God.
For the first time in like a decade. KFC is so bad. Like
it's really bad.
Hey, I just had KFC. No, I didn't get KFC. I had fried chicken. Never mind.
I mean, fried chicken, don't get me wrong, fried chicken is good.
No.
KFC is hot, soggy garbage. It is so disgusting. I don't know if it's way better in China, but
I have
anyway.
great memories of KFC as a kid. We used to like get a bucket for the family and go up into the mountains. So like I don't eat it very often now, but like in my mind I'm like, no, it's got these fond childhood memories attached to it.
KFC, I feel like there was maybe a golden era in the 90s where it was doing good, and it's obviously trying to come back, but at least in Canada, I don't know if it's the same in the States. KFC has like bottom barrel reputation. It is.
Yeah, it's no good.
It's my dad's favorite restaurant, which tells you everything you need to know about KFC.
So what I would love to see is like the financials for China KFC from this like little thing. I bet they're just like, oh my gosh, this was hugely successful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No doubt.
So next year they have to one up it.
It's just so funny, and like some of these photos are making me laugh. Like, and then of course people like have turned it. Chinese Final Fantasy players have turned it into like a raid boss. That's how how they jokingly refer to it. Is like they're going into a raid together where the raid boss is just consuming this unholy amount of food. And so there's lots of funny memes, especially if you're a Final Fantasy 14 player or an MMO player. I'm sure you can appreciate it. But Favis in the chat says in the UK it's also terrible. So I think at this point we could probably safely say that KFC around the globe is hot dog shit.
Quote it. Put it on the bucket, KFC.
I would love it if they quoted me on that.
Right on.
You know where to find me, KFC.
Go read that story. It's in the chat. It's very, very funny, and tragic and terrible and all the good stuff. Perfect 2019 humor.
It is. in a country that is undergoing like huge protests. Half of it is like below the poverty line and starving, and then the other half is eating meals designed for a family just to win fat chocobos is the most 2019 thing.
It's a good thing it's a fat chocobo, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Very cute. My highlight of the week is the news of this game. It's woodworking simulator. Is there an ing on there? Probably an ing.
To be clear, this isn't like one of those weird Steam porn games, right?
No, it's not one of those weeks, Steven. I have a wholesome, laid back, down to earth highlight of the week this week, and it's pretty cool. I'm gonna get the trailer up for people watching on video, and we'll just let it run. But Woodwork Simulator, it's just an alpha right now. I think it's like a pre-alpha actually. Yeah, pre-alpha. These are the folks that put together PC building simulator, and which is a really like in-depth, detailed PC building simulation. It's surprising how in an era of irony, where every time you see simulator tagged on to any game name, it's going to be a crapshoot, whether it's legit or just a goofy physics nightmare. This is legit. It looks pretty good. It's again pre-alpha, so it's really early, but they have a free-form just woodcutting mode, all these different tools. I've played around in it a bit, and it can be, the controls aren't great yet. The tools aren't as responsive or reliable, but there's an undo button, so you can undo any fuck up. But it's really cool, and it seems very soothing to me to be able to do this and practice, maybe like legitimately practice projects. If you're like, oh, you want to blueprint something, and eventually, maybe not in this pre-alpha, test it out. It seems like it could happen. Oh shit, I didn't even play the goddamn thing.
I didn't want to cut you off.
Sorry, I'll just let that run and this is the pre-alpha is free. You can find it on itch.io. I'll link to it in chat. And this is Woodwork Simulator. I went in and I tried to make a birdhouse. I fucked it up greatly. But I'm really excited to see this thing get some polish and maybe get a full release over time, just like PC Building Simulator, because I used to do this. This is like something I used to do all the time, and I don't, because I don't have space or money to do it anymore. And I don't know, it just seems like a really cathartic, creative, educational thing, like a kind of the ideal simulation game. So
yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, this past year, me and my partner moved into like a house, and so I've gotten into like home renovation stuff that I've never had to do before, like just and not anything complicated, but like installing cabinets and stuff like that. But it was really fun, and I really enjoy it, and this excites me because it's sort of like a low risk way of doing it. Installing floating cabinets for the first time was a terrifying nightmare that kept me awake at night. And even after we were done, I was still like, what if those cabinets fall off the wall, or like we didn't secure them properly and they just rip out the whole drywall. So the idea of a game, and I know it's not home improvement simulator, it's woodworking simulator, but those kinds of things, it's just cool. It's such an obvious yet genius and clever extension of the PC building game, like taking that kind of technology of like this idea of crafting something or building something, and then just expanding on it and doing it with woodworking is just so rad. What a cool idea.
Yeah.
You mentioned this woodworking simulator. Joanna just wrote an article about this Sekiro inspired PC build. It looks like what I think a lot of it's 3D printed, but it's pretty amazing. I dropped the link in the chat if you guys want to check that out.
I saw that on the website today. It's beautiful.
It was GeForce Garage thing, but some guy in Spain, company in Spain did it, and it's amazing. Like, you look at it and you watch the video where the build process goes, and you're like, holy cow. So that was pretty cool. My only complaint was, I was like, wait, you put an RTX 2060 in this PC that probably took you 100 hours to build?
It's so funny because, like, when I used to do build of the week, I have this, like, go back and read my build of the week if you want to see me descend into some sort of manic depressive state over the course of 3 years, writing about a new custom-made PC every week. But the biggest complaint I had, and everyone had in the comments over that entire time, was that they would they would make these amazing custom builds, like a wine fountain, or like, oh god, I don't even remember. There was like one that was just
the guns.
Yeah, the gun was
the
rad.
Guns. I remember the guns.
They would always have like a 2 to 3 year old GPU as the centerpiece, and it's probably just because
950 Ti.
Yeah, I think the reason for that is because a lot of these are just novelty builds. They're not necessarily always going to be played on regularly. They're meant to be like toured around and shown off.
Some of them, maybe it just took them 3 years to build.
And exactly, right? So it's like,
right.
So it's funny. It's funny that still holds true, and it's still like, as much as I can understand it, I still am like, just put a 2080, get a 2080 in there. Anyway, right on. Cool. Is that all? Do we all do highlights? Should we talk about? Yeah. Let's move on to Final Fantasy. Let's talk about the Final Fantasy.
Boy.
14. Oh my god.
Why did you decide to play it?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. So I've never played a Final Fantasy game from start to finish. I've played many of them and get extremely bored.
Right.
Or and a lot of that was when I was younger as well, so I maybe couldn't have appreciated the socio-political commentary. Um, but yeah, I don't really have any emotional attachment to the series. It means nothing to me, and yet for whatever reason, over the weekend, I think it's just enough people were talking about it and playing it that I was like, I'll just see what this is. Because I played a lot of WoW back in the day and I enjoyed it,
Right.
relatively speaking. And I installed it and ended up playing. Gosh, I installed it like Wednesday, maybe last week, and I've played like 35 hours since then.
Wow.
Most of that on the weekend.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a Realm Reborn, the starting version of Final Fantasy you can play today, is not good really. It's not amazing, and yet it is still super mesmerizing and calming to me. And I think that's like why, I don't know, like it is super padded out. A lot of the quests are they ask you to go somewhere and then turn around and hoof it back to where you came from, or like to travel across the entire continent. And a lot of that is alleviated through fast travel, but even then it's like, why make me do this? Because there's even like a built-in like lore reason for having a codec system of sorts, like remote walkie-talkies. Just let me walkie-talkie with these folks.
Yep.
But I don't know. I think like I'm at a point in my life right now where I'm just like, it's summer. I have this massive backlog of extremely complex games, mentally demanding games, physically demanding in that like they demand a lot of attention and reflexes. And this is just the easiest, breeziest, most comfortable thing I've played in some time. Even though like it commits a lot of crimes, like I said, the quest design is really padded out and prolonged. There's some weird like level pacing stuff. I'm like level 37 now, and I'm trying to mainline the story quests. And sometimes they will keep you at pace with the level requirement for the next quest, and sometimes you'll need to go fuck off and do like 6 dungeons or whatever to like catch up. And even the side quests won't get you there. So that's frustrating. The fantasy storytelling is like extremely conventional, and there's some fun, like clever. I think it's not all dumb. I think while there are still big demigods and fantastic forces building up behind the scenes, a lot of these you kind of do a tour like you do in most MMOs through the world and encounter these zones and the particular social structure and culture there, and like most of their problems are with one another. They're internal or have to do with warring tribes or something. So there's a lot of it's not like extremely complex socio-political commentary, but it's like aware and not just there's evil here most of the time.
Yeah.
So that is keeping me on board. I think I'm like, okay, you're setting this feels like a foundation that can get very good and get very complex, and it's a good starting point, even if it's like I've seen all of this before. Beyond that, I think I did not expect it to just be a very good single player game. And by that I mean like it presents as an MMO, and there's a lot of that weird MMO cruft with crafting systems and like people in these towns just with they're dressed as neon rabbits and they have chocobo, it's just a clusterfuck and they're all dancing and dabbing and whatever. But if you mainline the story, or at least like stick to that, it's just a very good, I don't say RPG because there's not really much role playing to be done unless, but it's a very good like visual novel in that way. There's like, it presents to me more like that. I'm just kind of moving through this story effortlessly, occasionally doing a dungeon or whatever.
Right. I feel like you're absolutely like bang on actually. And that's like an idea that I wish or like a thought that I wish I would have had myself, because it's so true. Like it is a visual novel that you're reading through more than anything, because the role playing in that game is very very light, to the point where it almost is non-existent. Like you're getting new gear, but you're not ever having to really make many decisions on how you build your character. Every character follows a template. So every white mage is the exact same except for like the gear that they have. But the gear is just numbers that are higher.
Yeah.
So
there's even a button that's like equip my best shit for me, and like
yeah,
I love it so much. It's amazing.
It's a very simple game in that regard, and I think that they've just recognized that they're not going to be able to. I feel like maybe this is a smart decision for them to make, to keep it so simple and to just let other parts of the game sort of carry it. So like I think the things that really carry Final Fantasy 14 for me and have made me fall so in love with it is the story, which does get better. We can talk about that later. The visual presentation and the audio presentation are like outstanding. And I mean, you're kind of getting into it now.
I get tastes
35.
of it every like 10 hours. Every 10 hours, something rad happens that I'm like, that's anime as hell. That's like so cool. Yeah.
Yes. So like the game starts out so mundane, and it's a shame that it does it, because it almost doesn't need to. Like a lot of the stuff that you're learning, a lot of the characters that you're introduced to, these stories that you're sort of immersed in currently, and the cultures ultimately don't end up mattering that much in the grand scheme of things. It's kind of useful to know who they are, but you don't need this much detail. It's really once you get to the later expansions that become self-enclosed stories that it gets much better at introducing a new culture, walking you thoroughly through it, but then also making all of that information matter in a way that's consistent with the overarching narrative. But anyway, like, yeah, for me, it's just the visual splendor of it, I think, is so underrated. Like, I love going into these dungeons and seeing these bosses. A lot of WoW dungeons, like the bosses at the end of them are just a enemy that you've killed a million times, but bigger.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, it has different abilities, and, you know, it can be a really complex encounter, but it's almost let down by this idea that you're like, well, I'm just killing like another golem. Like, how many of these things have I killed before? This one has a crown on its head, big deal. But every dungeon and boss fight in Final Fantasy 14, as you go deeper and deeper into it, becomes more sort of extravagant and I don't know, just gets more out there, and the design and the storytelling gets really good. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. Everything you've said to me gives me a lot of confidence that I think you could be someone that could go the distance and play it all the way through.
Yeah, I think I'm almost positive like I will at this point. And I can tell you, like, I've asked you so many times, and many people have, like, should I play Final Fantasy 14? And I understand why it's such a frustrating question now. Because it depends so much upon your life style and like what you like, what you appreciate about games. And for me, like, I did not know the story of this game, and it was so fascinating to me. I watched those 3 pretty darn good no-clip documentaries that are just interviews with the team about Final Fantasy 14 when it first released, which was a basically completely different game that was an utter failure in terms of design, in terms of like the longevity of it. They turned around, but only by basically reassembling like the leadership around that game and saying, we're going to remake this game while supporting the old game. And over the course of like 2 or 3 years, something like that, it was a huge gamble. I had no idea. Like, maybe I did at one point, but I just wasn't, again, you know, not a huge Final Fantasy person or MMO person during that period of my life. So that, I think, is helping me appreciate what all the foibles of A Realm Reborn, and pushing me through it from I'm fascinated with the design of it in that regard. Like, having that context is like, I can't believe they did all, I mean, again, years of polish to have been put layered on some of that stuff, but it is still like fascinating, gargantuan like undertaking that I feel like I have to see through personally. That is like, I highly recommend everyone go watch those if you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Jules linked them in the chat, so you can click on this. It's the no clip documentary that talks about this. It is incredible. It's given me a lot more forgiveness after seeing those documentaries. And at that point, I was already past A Realm Reborn by the time that documentary came out. So I'd already sort of endured it. Going through it, you know, as someone that played it right at launch, it was just the crimes that Final Fantasy 14 commits, I don't think are crimes. They're crimes that every other MMO is guilty of, right? Like, you're talking about, there's a lot of fetch quests. There's a lot of like mundane, go here, talk to this person, come back. There's, you know, lots of fighting enemies that don't pose a real challenge in the overworld. The dungeons can be more challenging, but a lot of times you're you know, kill 3 boars, and those 3 boars have like absolutely no will to live. They basically roll over and die. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff, and so going into it, like when I first started playing it, I was cognizant of all that stuff, but because I am an MMO player and every other MMO does this, I think I've just become numb to it. But it's been cool seeing the game. I think they rebuilt it, and then with Heavensward, that was their opportunity to be like, okay, we've saved the game. Now we can actually start to execute on this vision we have for something greater than what we were able to achieve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it really starts to blossom into something that's altogether on its own. And then, Heavensward was really good. Stormblood was slightly worse than Heavensward in my opinion, but still great. But then Shadowbringers, which I just wrapped up, is sort of the moment for me, and I'm writing out my thoughts on it right now. But Shadowbringers is the expansion where I had like sort of 2 epiphanies. One being like, oh my God, this vision that they've had is incredible. And I'm so happy that I've sort of been on this journey waiting to see what they're able to accomplish. And 2, I no longer have reservations about recommending Final Fantasy XIV to people because Shadowbringers is so damn good.
And what do you mean good? Because I feel like, and I didn't listen to people when they were telling me this game was good because I said it's an MMO. It's good for an MMO. What do you mean when you say
Shadowbringers is it's not just good for an MMO. It's good on. It's easily my favorite Final Fantasy out of the entire series.
Holy shit. Right.
Keeping in mind that I'm not like a final. I haven't played every single Final Fantasy game in the series. I've played most of them, and I've beaten less than half of them. So like, I'm saying that without being the most qualified person to say that, but it is easily my favorite Final Fantasy. I think. And it's also probably the best single player. Like you're talking about it, approaching it from a single player perspective. The story it tells is probably one of the best stories I've ever seen in a long time. Like I put it right up there. Shadowbringers I put up there with like The Witcher 3.
Wow.
I put it up there with some of my favorite role-playing games. And obviously that's just my opinion. Other people might not be as hot on it. What I think Shadowbringers does so incredibly well is, and I've been saying this, I think I maybe even said this last week, so apologies if I'm just repeating myself. But to me, it's now that having seen it to completion, it is the Avengers Endgame of Final Fantasy XIV, which is, if you think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's 20 movies, there's all this world building that they've done, and these movies are all kind of loosely linked together and whatever. And then Avengers Endgame isn't a perfect movie by any means. There's a lot of problems with it, but it's audacious what they tried to do with that movie, which was we're going to take this sort of 10 plus years of Marvel cinematic movie making that we've done, and we're going to try and tie it all together into this one movie that, encompasses this entire universe and all of these characters. And they do a pretty good job. Like Avengers Endgame is a pretty fun movie. Shadowbringers, I think, does the same. It has the same aspirations, but it does it even better, in my opinion. So it takes like the 6 years of, and you're getting into the beginning of it, James, but it takes seeds that were planted in Heavensward. And at the time you're like, oh, what's this plot thread? Whatever. Like, I'm just going to move on with my life and do whatever. And there are seeds planted as far back as A Realm Reborn that are sort of left untouched, and they've been silently germinating this entire time. And then in Shadowbringers, there are character reveals, there are there are moments, there is, like a tidbit of lore that you learned 4 years ago suddenly becomes relevant or takes on this new facet. And it is actually like kind of breathtaking, the scope and scale of what they're able to accomplish with the storytelling. At the same time, it remains intensely personal, very rooted in your party. This one, what I love about Shadowbringers is they really captured the feel of being in a sort of a classic JRPG party, even though you're not actively fighting alongside these people. Most of the time when you're fighting, you can be fighting with a friend if you wanted to. But most of the story quests, you're just doing them by yourselves. But your NPC sort of group of companions that follow you through the story are constantly there to talk to you, even if they're not actively fighting alongside of you. And so you get this sense of going on this grand journey. But there's a lot of character development. There's a lot of moments where these character arcs that they've been building since A Realm Reborn finally have like a bow tied on them. And it's incredibly emotional to think of being like, I've spent 6 years, living and breathing this story and playing it. And to see them, put an end, like to bring an end to some of these character arcs that I've become so attached to is like really fulfilling. And it does it all like extraordinarily well. Like it sounds like I'm just rambling praises at this game, but it's really good. And I wish I could just spoil the ending or talk about some of the things it does in the ending. I won't. But like, one thing I will mention, and I think this is really hard for games to pull off, but sympathetic villains is like a hard thing that a lot of games struggle with. How do you make a sympathetic villain? And Final Fantasy, like, I don't know if you've met the Asians yet. Have you seen the robed dudes that wear masks?
Oh yeah, many times. They've been harassing me for so long.
So you will spend the entirety of everything up to Shadowbringers just thinking that those dudes are just evil for the sake of evil. And you were talking about that earlier when you said, "Oh, the game does a pretty good job of trying to approach things not realistically, but sort of evenly." You know what I mean? Like, oh, these beast tribes are bad, but here are the reasons why they're bad, and then you kind of understand it. And one of like the biggest omissions with that is just the Asians in general. They're just sort of these evil robed guys that are like very maleficent, and they spend most of like 90% of the game doing that. And in Shadowbringers, without spoiling anything, there is a whole area dedicated to understanding their motivations, and it actually is brilliant. It's
okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm so close to just spoiling it, so I won't say more. But like they do this really good turn where you get into the final battle, and it really just ends up being conflicted and emotional. Like it's everything you want from a JRPG. So anyway, like all this is to say, like everything that you're complaining about is still there, even in Shadowbringers. Like you're still they've smoothed some of those edges a little bit. You're still going to be like running around just talking. You'll have a quest where it's like just run over here and then talk to this guy and then run back.
Right.
And there's nothing that can be really done about that.
I mean, as long as it's not like to the offensive degree some of these like middle like 30 to 40 quests are, which are just asinine.
It's too much. And even Heaven's Word and Stormblood both have moments of that. Shadowbringers, I think they finally listened, and now there seems to be, the story moves at a pretty good pace. There doesn't feel like there's a lot of padding. Sort of the worst culprit is there's level gating, so you'll get to a point in the story where it's like, okay, you have to come back when you're level 72, right? And you're level 71. In those cases, like, you just run a dungeon or two.
It's kind of what I'm doing now. And I think most of all, like, most of this stuff, even though like I don't mind talking to people and running all around as long as they have interesting things to say. Like I don't care. That's like what I'm playing the game for anyway.
Right.
So I'm just at a point where it's like it's this weird Game of Thrones wannabe side story in these snowy hills, and I'm just sick of it. Because they're just bickering for and like there'll be a quest marker at the top of this observatory that takes like no kidding like 15-20 seconds to run all the way up, and then you'll be like, oh, go talk to someone across the valley, and then come back to me, and then back and forth and so on. So
I feel like some of the writing in the beginning, like there were moments where I rolled my eyes. Like some of the writing in Realm Reborn is like straight up cringy. Some of the way, like the old English that they tried to talk in, they thank God have like slowly walked back from that, where now it like most of the dialogue nowadays is just plain English, except for maybe one or two characters who it's like their thing that they always speak in like Shakespearean English. The other thing that I think gets better over time that helps with that, as long as you're sort of on board with what's happening and you're not forcing yourself to suffer through it, is as the stakes in the story gradually get bigger and bigger and bigger, you start to become more invested in what characters have to say. So like right now you're at this point where, if characters are just dumping exposition in your lap, you're a stranger to this world. It doesn't matter to you. Like I don't give a shit, right? Once you get further into the game, you start to care what these characters have to say. You start to want to read everything. It got to the point in Shadowbringers, which is the first time that this has happened in an expansion, where I've been in certain points in the main story, like going out of my way just to talk to characters I didn't even have to talk to, just to hear what their dialogue lines were. Like if you think of like a typical JRPG, there's always like the town full of people with just dialogue lines, and it's a good sign if you're enjoying the story, if you want to hear what each of those characters has to say versus just run onto the next main beat. But
cool.
I think hearing you talk about it, I think you're well positioned to be someone that will appreciate what the game eventually does, like why people love it. The anime bullshit gets ramped up to
Love
12.
that stuff. I mean,
There's-
it hooks you right at the beginning with a dragon hatching out of a moon and raining down fire upon the world. And I'm like, all right, when am I going to see more of that? And it takes a while to see more of that. But I saw like a snippet of the Shadowbringers trailer, and it was 100% of that kind of shit. So
yeah. Shadowbringers really, like, they just go all in, and it almost makes me a bit worried about what they're going to do next.
That's what I was going to ask you,
Warcraft,
because you said this is the end game,
right?
the Avengers Endgame, Final Fantasy. Have they like wiped the slate clean for like kind of a new arc, or like are you a little worried about where they take it now? Is there anywhere to go?
There's definitely, so they're really good with this, and the way the expansions work, and this is sort of a catch-22, is that like in World of Warcraft, if you're catching up like you are, you can just quickly level through the expansions. Once you've sort of done the main expansion story, you just move on to the next thing, right? Final Fantasy, because it's such a story-oriented game, it forces you to not only go through the expansion main story, but then all of the DLC or not DLC, but like the post-launch update story. So usually there's about 5 chapters that are released for each expansion afterwards that can also take another 30 plus hours to get through. It's probably doubles the size of the main story scenario for each sort of chapter, each expansion. So anyway, at the end of this main story, they definitely like lay a lot of seeds for what's going to happen next. Because Shadowbringers, like the point of Shadowbringers, and this is hard to explain to anyone that doesn't understand the game, but like the world you're exploring in Shadowbringers is like a different dimension. You're not back in sort of the main world where you're currently adventuring, and all of the problems facing the main world are still there. So you've sort of tied off. It's almost like this little offshoot, and the two are connected in a lot of meaningful ways, but once you wrap up the story, it's sort of like, well, the world is still screwed.
Okay.
So what I'm struggling is, Shadowbringers lays a lot of the lore, like the big lore questions that people had. Like I was mentioning, the Ascians, these evil villains, who are they? What are their motives? It explains all of that. It lays all of that bare. It throws open the doors on a lot of sort of the big Final Fantasy XIV secrets that people have been pondering and wondering about for so long. And so I'm sort of, what's, if you're planting these seeds and now like they've just, to use this dumb metaphor that I've been returning to during this entire conversation, now like a lot of these seeds that this game has planted over its life have all come to bloom. I'm like, what do they have next? Because, how are they going to keep upping those stakes? And some of the things that happens, like some of the final dungeon is batshit crazy, like anime fighting in space nonsense. So now I'm kind of like, how do they even visually sort of up the stakes? So, who knows? They'll have the post-launch story. Hopefully it's good. And then in 2 years, we'll have another expansion, and God knows where they're going to go with it. But
right on. Well, interesting. Sorry, what?
Yeah. Sorry. Final thought. I know I'm just like,
go for it.
Rambling. I will say that, like, just playing up until Shadowbringers, like Shadowbringers ties such a nice bow on everything so far that even if you just commit it, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh, I like role-playing games, I'm okay with MMOs. I like Final Fantasy stuff. I like anime. This kind of sounds great. Even if you were to just commit to playing up through Shadowbringers and then I think stopping altogether, you would have had a complete sort of emotionally satisfying arc.
Gotcha.
And then whatever comes next.
Yeah, and for anyone who's, I don't know, now that I'm like a big chunk of the way through A Realm Reborn, I could like, it's more understandable that people would use a level skip and like just watch all of the cinematics, because a lot of that stuff is pretty easy to get from a video or from just like couple, read a couple wikis and you'll get the big beats without spending.
Concerned with that though, because I'm like, then like if you jump straight into Heavensward and then just kind of watch a bunch of the cutscenes, I guess the problem is that like, because it's a game that's so much about the journey and not the destination, even if there's parts of the journey that suck, if you don't experience those parts that are bad, the parts that are good might not
Oh,
be as good.
yeah.
Is sort of my
Interesting.
that's
How
that's why I've
can you
always
know
been
joy
hesitant.
without suffering through pain?
Yeah, like,
Exactly.
you have to have a lot of really droll conversations with these characters to appreciate when they finally have something good to say.
Okay. All right.
But
Well,
I don't know.
I'm just saying. I think you could. It's
You think you could
doable.
do it?
I think if anyone has a big just gap in their play schedule and is looking for something more fascinating than it is like fun moment to moment. If you want to be part
Yeah.
of like I'm mostly into it. Like I think just to be part of this as the next expansion comes around to really feel sort of that the cadence of these releases. Everyone gets so excited, and I visually like what's going on. And now that I'm in it, I feel a part of something bigger than myself, which is maybe too abstract
Right.
to get into on this show. But I yeah, I think it's worth checking out, especially if like any of these any of the intersections of the things we've talked about, work for you. So, but
Yeah.
so we don't spend all show talking about Final Fantasy. I totally could. Let's move on to another fantasy, a hardware fantasy. Jared's going to take us through that world. So AMD, we said at the top
Is
of the
it
Yeah.
show.
emotionally fulfilling?
Oh, it was a journey of like years in the making.
Oh my gosh.
Mm.
Talking about Final Fantasy from my perspective, I don't think I've ever played more than a few hours of any of them, and I tried Final Fantasy 15 and just about died. It was so bad for me. So
You
I
also,
I
I posted that nonsense cutscene. There's a really silly cutscene, and I posted it in our work chat. And Jared seemed genuinely disgusted that it existed.
I was like, what the hell is this stuff? It's awful.
You seemed pretty bad.
It was bad.
I
Like,
didn't
why
say it
did
was bad. I said you seemed pretty mad.
no, it was bad and I was mad.
He's the resident
Anyway.
bad boy. Hey,
Yeah.
Hardware,
yeah,
hardware.
talk about
So,
AMD's lineup.
so if you haven't been following hardware, the brief recap is NVIDIA makes faster GPUs and Intel makes faster CPUs, and it's been that way for a long time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And part of Intel's advantage is that they've had better manufacturing than AMD. And then Intel went from 14 nanometer and tried to go to 10 nanometer. And they were originally supposed to launch 10 nanometer in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
I think, maybe even 2015, but their schedules get pushed back, revised. 10 nanometer for Intel was just a catastrophe. They tried to go too far, push things too much. They've even kind of admitted as much in a recent statement. Um, but Intel still has not released 10 nanometer in bulk in quantities. And their first 10 nanometer chips are coming out in a few months, and
Oh
they'll be
boy.
mobile chips, which means they're smaller and easier to make and not as complex. There's word that we may still have two more 14 nanometer chips from Intel. Anyway, that's all the CPU background on Intel. AMD, meanwhile, they divested themselves of their manufacturing to a company called Global Foundries as a spin-off from AMD's manufacturing side, and then they started basically outsourcing manufacturing to whoever could do it best.
Mm-hmm.
So the first several generations was done through Global Foundries, but then they also did graphics cards through TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company, and TSMC is now on 7 nanometer, which is what's being used for Apple's latest iPhones and
Mm.
iPads, and now it's being used for AMD CPUs and graphics cards, and
All right.
basically that gives them a process node advantage over both Intel and NVIDIA. NVIDIA could move to it. Intel never would because Intel would like makes their own stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this is a big deal, and Ryzen fixed so many of the problems with AMD CPUs, like it boosted performance 50%, but it was still slower in games. And so now
Mm.
we're on third gen Ryzen, and instead of being comparable manufacturing, AMD has a technical lead. So we get the showdown. And unfortunately, in my testing,
Oh no.
Ryzen still did not beat Intel across the board in gaming performance.
Okay.
It does well though. So, I mean, the important thing is with the fastest GPU available right now, 2080 Ti. Um, it's a $1,200 graphics card running at 1080p ultra, so that we're not totally GPU bound.
Mhm.
And the performance difference between the two, the fastest Ryzen, the Ryzen 9 3900X and the Core i9 9900K, um, like in games, Intel wins by 10% on average.
Okay.
Um, which you're like, okay, 10%, right? But that's with the fastest GPU. If you drop down like one level to 2080, it'd probably shrink to 5%. If you're
Mhm.
at a 2070 or lower, it's going to be a tie. Then the bigger flip side was on their multi-threaded performance. Their 3900X is about 20% faster than Intel. So, in everything outside of games, basically AMD is now leading, and they're legitimately fast enough for games um, that they're worth considering. And the flip side is then the prices were a lot higher than some of the people were hoping.
Oh,
So,
really? Because they're usually known for being
right.
Right.
the budget.
So
Yeah.
it's the funny thing is, and I've told this to people all the time. I'm like, look, if AMD could charge more for its products, it absolutely would. They want to make money. Like that's why they're a corporation that exists. They need to make money, and so there were rumors that were, it wasn't even rumors. It's just flat out fabrications, BS nonsense, leaked last December of product names and prices and performance and specs, and it's like, let me just clue you guys in. Nobody releases pricing 6 months before
No.
launching a product.
Yeah, we're just gonna
Like, it's
guess
just
where the market's at. We're just gonna.
so
Yeah.
it's like a fanboy basically made some stuff up and guessed at product names, guessed at specs, made a video about it, and the AMD faithful went nuts. And oh my gosh, they're gonna have an 8-core processor for $200 and a 6-core processor for $100. No, the 6-core processor is $200. The 8-core processors start at $330. And it's fine. I'm one of those guys who, if you ask me like, hey, I want to get into PC gaming, what should I do? I'm like, look, don't skimp on your build. Like, try and invest more money, because you're going to sit on that PC for probably 4 or 5 years at least. And so if you start at the bottom, you're going to be grumpy about this game doesn't work right, whatever.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So the Ryzen CPUs, they're good. The caveat to all of this testing is, so I mentioned the term of the day for Stephen, AGISA, the AMD
Right.
generic encapsulated software architecture, because that just rolls off the tongue. And it basically, if you want a different name for it, it's called firmware. It's what goes into your motherboard to tell it how to properly communicate with the processor and other devices. And so things like memory support, memory timing, stuff like that, that's influenced heavily by the AGISA version that you're running. So when Ryzen first launched, I don't know if it was AGISA 1.0 or what they called it, but they're now up to like, well, for the old motherboards, they're up to like 1.0.0.6 or zero point 0.7. And each generation has improved memory compatibility, improved stability. So we had some serious problems with the first generation Ryzen in terms of what they worked with and what they didn't and such. And so that's gotten better. With Ryzen third gen, they've further refined things, and mostly it just works. But the flip side is the GISA code that you're running sometimes impacts how far the processors boost and how long they stay there and some other things. So I've seen reviews where I'm like, dang, like, how are they getting performance that's like 5% higher in single
Hmm.
threaded than what I'm getting? And it's because they're using a different motherboard, running different firmware,
Gotcha.
and so they boost differently. So I've tested two motherboards, Asus and MSI. The MSI is their X570. It's MEG, the MSI Extreme Gaming. MEG X570 Godlike. Their Godlike line, if you don't know, is their insane, like, it costs, I think this one costs $600, and it
Oof.
has all the bells and whistles.
Okay.
It comes with like a video capture card. I think it might have 10 gigabit Ethernet support. Things that most people don't use. But if you want them, it actually isn't a bad price. If you don't use them, then it's total overkill. Um, MSI's board isn't always faster than the Asus board that costs like one third as much. So you get what you pay for. No. Anyway, I'm waiting for a gigabyte board, and I'm going to test that and see if performance is any better. If I can get a firmware version that's like that magic sweet spot. But hopefully, the 10% performance in gaming difference between Intel and AMD, like at the top, that might even decrease with the right firmware. So
Hmm.
that's Ryzen. Ryzen's out. It's good. It's fast. You can now find previous gen Ryzen's systems or or CPUs on sale for like pretty insane prices. Especially with like Prime Day, they had their normally $200 part, the 2600 was on sale for 120
Hmm.
at Newegg. And then their 2700, which was launched at $300, typically sells for like $230, $220. That was on sale for 150, which
Dang.
it's
See,
like, hey, it's not going to beat a $500 Intel CPU, but it doesn't have to, like, at all.
yeah, do some
Um,
research and
yeah,
stay woke to these deals. This is why we like twice a year, Black Friday and Prime days now, we tend to
yeah.
just like take over the homepage with this stuff because it's if you're paying attention and you're in the market for a PC or an upgrade, there's some good stuff.
Yeah, there's some killer deals.
Yeah.
Um, their latest stuff wasn't really on sale, but there was like a $50 off thing where if you bought a Ryzen, what was it, Ryzen 5 3600X with an Radeon X RX 5700 XT, maybe it's just the regular, it was like say $50, which if you wanted to get it, the new AMD stuff, that was cool. Um, GPUs, right? This is their new RX 5700 XT with the funky little divot. But
Yeah, looks like a
and then
defect.
Looks like you dropped it.
yeah, there
It's a
were some great
feature.
memes. So this is the 5700 700 XT. There were some great memes where someone like showed their package for a 5700 XT and they like dented the box. But so 5700. I went to AMD's E3 briefing on these, and they told us about it. They gave us kind of performance comparisons, and then like they said, "Well, what do you think?" And I told them in advance. I said, "Look, it needs to be $400 or less for the XT, or it's going to be a problem because Nvidia is going to respond." They announced pricing of $450. I was like, "Oh no, that's too high." And then right before launch, they cut the price to $400, and I was like, "Excellent." Uh, Bottom line is at $400, AMD wins in performance by like 5 to 10%. At $350, which is where the vanilla 5700 lands, they beat the 2060 by 10%. So good news, right? The only caveat is you don't get ray tracing at all. Like I mean, like you could do it through software in theory, but AMD does not support DirectX ray tracing API right now. They could in theory, but they're kind of refusing to. And I think it's a weird thing because it's like, hey, you're the smaller company in the graphics market. Like Nvidia is like 80%, 85% of the discrete GPU market. So like as the 15%, you don't get to control where the market goes, and not supporting the new API doesn't win you favors. Plus, we know they're going to support ray tracing next year with the consoles. So
Okay.
like there's a little bit of odd stuff there, but
Hmm.
at the same time it's like, well, the ray tracing games we have so far haven't been just like
Yeah.
amazing.
I
Right.
was gonna say like it's probably I don't know. They had the luxury of watching Nvidia's opening salvo and seeing the support come after, and it's like, is it really going to be worth it just to like
Yeah.
get that back of the box bullet point at
Well,
this
the
point?
question is like, what happens with ray tracing over the coming
Yeah,
years?
bigger
And
mystery.
well, and people always say, well, look at the games right now, and they perform so slow, they need faster hardware, and it's like partially true, but it's a new API, and so there is that potential, and I don't know how viable it is, but they could figure out some good software hacks and things where it's like, hey, guess what? We can cut the number of rays we're casting in half without sacrificing image quality, and therefore ray tracing performance becomes better, and you can enable it even on a 2060. Like it's possible. So we need to see where that goes. The other side is like Nvidia is pushing really hard on this, and I mean, like people are like, "Oh, there's only like 4 or 5 ray tracing games out right now." I'm like, okay, flashback to DirectX 12 launch with Windows 10. It actually came out months after Windows 10. For about the first year, there was one DirectX 12 game, Ashes of the Singularity, and it made headlines because it was the first, and it got used in all the benchmarks because it was the only, and it's like, so here we
Right.
are less than a year after launch, and we've got at least 5 games and like 5 or 10 more planned before the end of the year. I'm like, that's actually really fast for a new API. And you could say the same thing with DirectX 11, DirectX 10, DirectX 9, going back, it's like getting developers to jump on the new API takes time, and it's not always the best implementation for the first round. But ray tracing support is actually picking up more than a lot of people give it credit for. So I think 3-5 years from now, like ray tracing is the standard in a lot of games. Like they'll do things with rasterization, but they'll use the ray tracing acceleration, and we'll get better looking games and cool effects, and and it will be thanks to NVIDIA pushing on it. But the converse, the flip side is NVIDIA pushed on it and increased prices, and that kind of bit them in the butt. So anyway, so that's AMD's side. They've also like new APUs, which even though they're 3000 series, so there's the new Ryzen 3 2200G and Ryzen 5 2400G, right? And you've got the new Ryzen 9 3900 and all those, they're in the 3000 series, right? But the APUs, the ones with Vega graphics, are actually Zen Plus, and not Zen 2. So they're kind of the like slightly improved second generation Ryzen as opposed to third generation, despite the numbering. So I've got one of those for testing. I haven't even gotten around to that yet because all of this AMD and product launches happened while I was on vacation. So I worked on vacation. That was fun. Anyway, so you got that. You've got NVIDIA did their super cards, 2060 Super, 2070 Super, 2080 Super comes out. I believe we're allowed to say on the 23rd. I'm pretty sure that's not embargoed. So like we'll see how that goes.
Good time to say
Bad
that information
boy.
on a live
The
stream.
bad boy, I'm telling you.
They've showed the products and all this stuff. I'm like, that can't possibly be embargoed still, right? If I did, if I broke embargo there, I'm sorry, NVIDIA, but it's not a secret as far as I know.
Okay.
So 2080 Super will be tested in a week and a half, and we'll have the review up. That's their new $700 card. So your old $700 card is now outdated, but not really, because the 2080 Super is only going to be like 5 to 10% faster.
Okay,
So,
I was scared
there you
there
go.
for a sec.
Yeah, you've got a 2080. Steven, you've got a 2070, right?
Yeah.
And I've got all the cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. My kids play Minecraft on like my AMD Ryzen system. Like that's there when I'm not doing anything else. They use one of my test beds. It's got a 2080 Ti in it. Like they have no idea how spoiled they are.
Someday.
So, good times. Yeah.
Are they playing Minecraft with like extreme shaders on it though, where it looks photorealistic,
No,
4K
it's Minecraft.
textures?
Like they wouldn't
Huh?
even notice probably. I mean, I haven't tried to put in any mods or reshades or anything on it. They can play 4K.
Right.
But, yeah. Was there any other hardware stuff you guys need to know about? Oh, and PCIe Gen 4, new faster PCI Express bus, doubled the bandwidth basically. Not really important for graphics, but doubling your bandwidth does open the way for some
I
cool
love
stuff.
bandwidth.
Maybe. Yeah, bandwidth is good.
Widen that road. Right on.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Jared. It's always nice to realize I have no idea what's happening in hardware.
I understood some of those words.
It's like a whole. It's honestly like it's just a whole different. I used to be so savvy, and then they put me on this video game part of the gig. Now I don't know anything. But
Yeah.
Well, you guys talk Final Fantasy, and my eyes glaze over. I'm like, oh, not Final
it's
Fantasy
sort of
again.
yeah. It's one of the trade-offs of the show, I guess. Is there's always going to be something that bores one of the guests to tears. So we'll have an all hardware extravaganza one day, Jared, and you can we'll have someone who doesn't know hardware at all. You can just torture. It'll be great. Maybe we'll get Tim on there and just like get really
just
specific.
like as many acronyms as I can.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, sounds good to me. But let's move on to our next subject, which is the Steam Labs. And Steam Labs, again, if you don't know what we're talking about, is Steam's new initiative to test certain modules outside of I guess the client before it's integrated, or if it is integrated. And I'll link to it in chat here if it works. I don't know if it's gonna work because I logged in, but you don't have to log in with your account. You can play around with it along with us if you like. Let me get it up on the screen. We're gonna go through. We're gonna put it to the test and try some variables out and see what we get. See what we get spit back at us, and see if we may not know about these games, but we'll just read about them and see if they sound like something we actually might enjoy. All right, let me get this up here. Got to do some Twitch stuff. I don't know, Twitch stuff.
It was pointed out that the 2080 Super information that is not embargoed.
Okay.
They did announce. I was pretty sure of that, but sometimes even all those dates get stuck in my head. Like they released most of the specs. I don't think they released all the specs, but
Gotcha.
yeah.
You're safe.
Yeah. So we're gonna start off. Let me just explain this to our viewers here. Make sure we can see it all right. Looks like we can see it okay. Let's scroll down a bit. Cool. So here you see the interactive recommender, is what they're calling it, and it's just a dynamic tool for finding games that you might like based on a couple, well, two main variables here, or at least like axes here, popular to niche and older to newer, with a 10-year, I think it's a 10-year, yeah. And you just drag those and it will rearrange. Sorry, what's that?
Your most played game is Borderlands 2?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is only half of
23 hours.
I've played probably 300 hours of it because I had it on console too. It was back in college. It was like, yeah, you can see here also your top 50 games and playtime. This is not actually representative of my entire history of games because I've played a lot of these on console, like most of the Dark Souls series I've played on console too, and Adventure Capitalist I just let run in the background. Some of these are like high because I had a card, the card harvesting tool or whatever. Run the games idle. So I don't know. Like, plus I play pretty widely. That's another fascinating aspect of this tool is seeing like how people play. We shared all these around in chat, and some people have like, it's just like Evan's like hundreds of hours in all these different like tactical first person shooter games, and then like nothing else. And then you'll have Chris Livingston with like the Skyrims and the weird simulators up top, and nothing else. Well, he plays pretty widely too, but me, I'm just like, I try to touch everything just to see what's going on. I like to play widely, so that's another cool aspect. But we're gonna try some things out. We're gonna start off with the first test, which is we're gonna max these bars out. We're gonna slide all the way to niche, and you two. I think Jared, you already found your results, but Steven, if you want to play along, you can tell us what you get. And in chat too, play along if you like. We're gonna slide all the way over to niche and to old. So we're gonna see the oldest, most niche thing that Steam thinks we like. And I got Knee Deep. A washed-up actor hangs himself on location. A spotlight is cast on the backwater Florida town of Cypress Knee. So it sounds like a cool detective game. And actually, I've been eyeballing this one for a while, so it's kind of cheating.
It's on your wish list.
I mean, that
you
sounds...
That exclude wish list games.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I wish listed it earlier today because I... the next one's
it worked.
The next one's like a claymation adventure game. So all this is very like, it makes sense to me. What are some of the ones you guys got?
I got something called Hexodius, which I've never heard of, but it's what is it? It says it's a potent blend of twin stick shooting, exploration, and customization. I don't know. I kind of talked about James's games. My games, if you look at my Steam playlist, like it has games that are like, 150, 190 hours. Grand Theft Auto 5 is top on my list. I've honestly only played that game probably 30 hours, and the rest of that is benchmarks.
Yours might be skewed for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's games that I would play, like Tomb Raider's up there, Skyrim's up there, Hitman, Fallout 4, Wasteland 2. Wasteland 2, I didn't benchmark, so apparently I played 100 hours plus of Wasteland 2. Awesome.
Nice.
But yeah, like Hexodius, I've never heard of it. Signal from Tulva.
I know that one.
I haven't heard of that either.
I forgot the name of that studio, but they did. Shoot, it's like a Far Cry
Yeah, it's a
First
first-person
person.
open-world shooter set on a distant, haunted future world. So,
Sounds neat.
I mean, that sounds kind of interesting. That's only a couple years old.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed is that like I did older, and most of my results are like from the last like 4 years,
Yeah, it
5
still
years.
doesn't seem to do anything more than about five,
I
six
think
years
that's
old.
when the bulk of Steam releases happened, though, is in like over the last like you know, it
Seems
became much more
accurate.
accessible. So it makes sense to me. What about you, Steven?
My first one was Immortal Planet, which is an action RPG with challenging combat that rewards patience and punishes recklessness. I've never heard of this game, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
You should play it.
It's got very positive reviews, so that is nice.
All right.
Other than that, yeah, I got like this game called Mini Law, Ministry of Law. It's an obvious 1984 reference. Frozen Synapse. I don't know how that game is supposed to be niche.
Yeah,
I
there's
like that
some
game.
weird
That was a fun
classification.
game.
Maybe it's just I don't know.
Um,
Yeah, I wonder.
but I
Like, it
feel
makes me
like
wonder how they determine what is niche. Like, what variables
right.
stack it towards that. Um, because I know a lot of maybe that game just didn't get played as much as we think it did, even though it got a lot of attention and maybe
Yeah,
success, relative success. I don't know.
yeah, maybe it's one of those things where like, oh, people covered it a lot. Like the
Yeah,
press loved it, but it just maybe didn't sell that well.
interesting.
I honestly don't know.
Cool.
But yeah, other than that, like, I don't know. This all seems like niche stuff that's older.
You gonna wish list? Wish list. Wish
I
list
don't have a
something.
wish list. I've never used it.
You've
I'm like
never used it.
the no, I'm like the most non-Steam user you could possibly have. Like I
That's
use
all right.
it just to play games, and that's basically it. But like my played stuff isn't exactly weird either. So I think I'm like a pretty good candidate for it. Like
Okay.
my most played game is Rocket League, but then going down the list, it's a lot of uh, MMOs, role-playing games,
Right.
shooters,
Yeah,
Assassin's
a lot of
Creed.
your MMOs probably aren't played through Steam, right?
No, yeah,
Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I scroll down, like it gets more niche stuff I haven't heard of that I'm curious about. Like I got a lot of adventure games, some spooky stuff, which is cool. Which is cool. I'm like happy to see that. Let's slide that over to let's see what do I got next. Test 2 is new and niche maxed. So slide that timeline over to newer and see if it changes significantly. So a lot of new results, and by new, like I think it limits it to 6 months.
6 months.
So a totally different set here for me. I got my top result is Game Soup, a collection of 46 challenging mini games, including parodies of famous games.
that sounds
Following that
terrible.
is Photographs, which I actually know about. A narrative tragedy puzzle game. It's from the developer of like I think You Must Build a Boat and stuff like that. But yeah, these seem like up my alley. Like I like really colorful, wacky, satirical games, and I like
Exorcist, is that like a typing game? Your fourth
Texas.
one?
Oh, I've actually heard of this. Yeah, it's like an over the top typing game, which is it's fun. Bullet hell and typing. So you got me
That
there.
sounds good.
The Lonely Planet series I'm big into. So yeah, I think all this stuff is like pretty on point. What stuff did you guys get, Jared? What's on your list here?
My top result is Flashback, which is actually really apropos because I played the original way back in the day and
Oh,
thought it
cool.
was just amazing. I guess it just had its 25-year anniversary. So when I was 20, the original came out. I think there was another game before it called Another World or Other World or
Yeah.
something like that, and it was the sequel. So I'm like, oh man, like those were awesome back in the day. So it looks like the graphics haven't been upgraded or anything, but that might be worth checking out on my thing. Anniversary collection of arcade classics because I'm old and it knows that I like games from the 80s, I think. Age of Centauri. Yeah, I don't. Most of the others I don't recognize at all.
Gotcha.
So, Seventh Guest 25th Anniversary Edition.
That game's not good anymore.
I never played the Seventh
It's
Guest.
just a
is the
bunch of
funny
weird
thing.
logic puzzles
Yeah.
wrapped up in it. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Steven, what's give us a little cross section. What's
Yeah, this was completely different for me too. I'm pretty impressed with what it gave me. My top one was Ubermosh Volume 7. He plays a saint
Ubermosh?
fighting in a gun-filled pit, defeating as many opponents as you can in a 90-second match. The Ubermosh, an enlightenment ritual of combat. A lot of the stuff that I got ended up just looking like Devolver Digital adjacent kind of games.
Yeah.
Even like the Devolver Bootleg collection is like my number 3 pick. Hypnospace Outlaws on there. But Katana Zero. This is all stuff I would actually play. It all looks very cool. Weirdly enough, there's like everything on my list is pink right now. It looks like that synthwave
They know you.
look. I don't. Yeah, I think apparently
You like that ooey gooey.
that's my aesthetic.
Style. Yeah. That neon. Cool. Let's do a couple more and just see what we get. So let's go oldest, and most popular. Let's kind of flip the niche to popular. Real quick, I got the top game. I have no interest in playing this game, even though I would probably enjoy it. I just feel like I get it from looking at it. Is Human Fall Flat? It's that physics-based playground or like obstacle course with multiplayer aspects now. It looks like a great time. I just, yeah, I mean, that's an on-point recommendation, I think. Second is Dead by Daylight, which we all know what that is, a multiplayer asymmetrical horror game, which is exactly my shit. Also no interest in that, playing that. I thought I had played it, actually. It's kind of weird that it's on this list. But and then The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, followed by Rainbow Six Siege, which I reviewed for us, but I own and you play, so it doesn't know I own it. So, you know, I don't like... It's weird to me that roguelike is on here because I generally don't like those. Maybe I just have enough in my library or something. I don't know. Or it thinks I will like the style of it. I'm noticing a lot of these are kind of creepy looking and that the color palette is like the same. It's funny that you brought attention to the color palette, Steven, because I have like a lot of browns and grays and dark colors. And I'm wondering if that's literally like a factor.
That's right. Yeah. I'm trying to like think about why do these all share this commonality?
I don't know. Could just be a genre coincidence, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
What'd you get this time, Steven?
Let's take a look. I got the most like generic stuff. Like my top one is Paladins, War Thunder, Dirty Bomb, Civilization 5, The Witcher, Battle Right. So like a lot of multiplayer progression games, I guess is how I would describe those.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Mine's like Ubisoft Central. Like, okay, so top one is Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which I own on GOG. And then Metro 2033 Redux, which I think I have both that and the original. So I'm like, oh, okay. Wolfenstein New Order, and then I get Far Cry 4, 5, Tom Clancy's Division, Assassin's Creed Origin, Ghost Recon Wildlands. Like, those all are on Uplay for me. So got Path of Exile in there, a couple of Wolfenstein games.
Does it feel appropriate? I don't know. I think it's like almost harder to. It feels a little more indistinct with the popular slider up because it's like, yeah, I know of these mostly, and I've
heard of every game on this list. Yeah. I think for the popular stuff, which is that makes sense. Some of them I have played. I beat almost no games these days. It feels like so.
It's happening to me too. Let's slide that older over to newer, but keep it at popular and see what we get. Yeah, I mean, my first result is Trover Saves the Universe, which is that VR. I don't think it's actually VR only, but game from Squanch Tendo. Is that what they're still called? Squanch Studios.
Yeah.
They might have changed it. The Justin Roiland, Rick and Morty adjacent developer. Which it looks funny. It looks funny to me. So, second is Void Bastards, which again also up my alley. Sort of. I don't like the roguelike part of it, but I guess there's roguelikes and everything now. When the Darkness Comes, I have never heard of this. Phoenix Wright, love that series. Pogo Stuck, Yuppie Psycho. Some of these actually I did not know were popular, so it's interesting to see them.
Yeah, their qualification for popular, I'm not quite sure on.
I'm still getting a lot of like kind of darker, or at least like psychologically. My cat is meowing at me. Creepy stuff. All right. Steven, I'm going to go see if she's okay. Talk to us about
that meow sounded distressed. I got, this is actually cool. This is all stuff that I would feel excited to get. So like Risk of Rain 2, I like that James left his mic on so we can just hear
I know his cat got outside. Everyone. Poor
James's cat. Guys, breaking news. James's cat is outside. Risk of Rain, Katana Zero, Baba Is You. So like a lot of the this kind of my list looks like the popular indie game recommendation list right now
Interesting.
of like Hypnospace Outlaws back there again. Again, a lot of pink.
I think that's
Is
sort of
that-
like maybe it's just the popular indie game
Yeah.
aesthetic, like Hotline
The
Miami
aesthetic
sets
du
something in
jour.
motion that cannot
Yeah.
be stopped ever again. Devolver took that aesthetic
Yeah.
and was like, everything is this now. I mean,
But
even looking
this
at
is-
mine, it's like Trover, Void Bastards,
Yeah.
Yuppie Psycho.
Do you guys think so here's like the question of the day. Do you guys actually think you would use this? I don't think I will.
No, because there's so many games that I have already and haven't played that I guess like the use case for this is if you are a very picky person who is maybe not savvy to like the video game website or Critical Sphere or other recommendation tools that you're just like, what should I play today? I have $30 for the month.
I feel it's
and
the
I don't know.
antisocial approach to gaming. Like, hey, I want to play a game that I don't want to ask anyone else, so I'm going to ask
Right.
the learning computer algorithm from Steam. I don't know. Like my top recommendations for the new and popular Far Cry New Dawn. I don't own that one. I own all the others.
Right.
But the second one's really good because it's Quake 2 RTX, which, you know, the ray traced version of Quake 2. I'm like, of course, I definitely need to play that. I've tried the demo.
I think for me, like it's just, and maybe I'm not representative of other types of gamers, but like I am not the type of person who has ever just walked into a store and picked up a game and been like, yeah, this looks cool, I'm gonna try it. Like games are too expensive
I did
for
that.
me to
I did that
do
back in the
that.
day. I when I was like 12 and didn't it was in a vacuum.
Oh
you know?
yeah. Yeah, because the packaging was everything. Like if the character looked cool or like the trailer or whatever.
Alice
Nowadays,
Alice in black and white all over the Walmart
yeah,
shelf.
Yeah,
The internet,
yeah.
this stuff would have been useful, right? Like,
yes.
I don't know.
in the
now-
no idea what was available.
I do like it for the niche part of it. I think that is fascinating, and
Sure.
especially with I don't know. It's useful. Is it something that I need?
Right.
Or can see myself using?
I could see it maybe like affirming. You know, like I'm looking at it and I'm seeing Risk of Rain 2 on it, and that's been a game that, you know, I know a lot of people love. I haven't tried it personally. I never played the original, but I love roguelikes. And so honestly, like for weeks, I've been sort of hovering around that purchase button and just thinking about buying it. So suddenly seeing it on this list now is sort of like, oh, you know, I should take the plunge and do that. And so I can see it kind of being a tool that, you know, if you're like, oh, let's see what Steam says I should play, and then you're seeing these games that you've already sort of been debating over,
I think
it can
it's
kind of maybe push you over the edge.
yeah. I think more so it's probably a better backend tool or curation tool for Steam itself. Like in however it presents a new storefront or in the sections it displays up top. I feel like now that they have all these variables and sliders, easy ways of, I don't know, you could put this kind of thing on the front page and like have a section right below the main bit that is just this, and it's like, you know, presented in a smaller, tighter space, but has sliders and dynamic tools. So like the first thing you see on the store page is like it gives you a generated title that says like the games you might like from 2012 or from 20, you know, niche games from 2012 you might have never heard of that you might like. That's an awful title, but and then that's like a dynamic thing. Like every time you log onto the store, like it mixes those variables around and presents you with that. But I don't think I'm going to, like, if I'm a developer, that's really valuable to me because I'm like, oh, how am I going to get surfaced on this page run by humans and weird algorithms, or the previous surfacing algorithms? Like this to me is like a interesting tool for curating spots on a store page or during a sale or whatever, and facing publicly, maybe not as like the primary method of discovery, but as like a cool component. But yeah, I don't know. it's cool. I think it's better, and I like that it is surface level compared to sorry, the cat. My girlfriend's laying outside on the lawn, and like my cat freaks out if you're outside. She's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?
That's
Are
a
you
smart
okay?"
cat.
Yeah, she's so funny. I know, it's okay. I'll let you out. Oh, it's okay. But she's so cute.
That meow hurt my
Totally
heart.
lost what I was saying. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think this solves any problems, but I think it makes it more transparent, and that is good. And it is a starting point for curation, like more interesting and dynamic curation on the front page of the store during sales. Like I said, I think that's
Yeah.
it's going to be cool.
Well, and I
that way.
think the fact that Steam obviously is capable of doing this kind of stuff, there's probably like a lot of things that aren't consumer facing that they can do with it and are doing with it and stuff. And so the fact that they've surfaced some cool knobs that you can play with and some different ways to like check things out is kind of interesting to me. But I am more interested to know. I guess what I'm trying to say is it wouldn't surprise me to realize that like the Steam Labs experiment is almost sort of a smaller part of something much bigger that's sort of under wraps and we don't know about. And that's what interests me is how Steam is modeling your behavior that you in this platform, if that makes sense. I don't know.
No, I think I got you.
I mean, like the amount of data that Steam has on all of us is probably a little scary. Like,
Yeah.
have you guys seen
Our
like
habits.
there's a thing where it's like I saw something where it's like, okay, put in answers to like 20 apps and say, do you have this installed on your smartphone or not? And that was the only information it asked you, and then it would guess whether you were male, female, age, income, and a bunch of other stuff. And it was
I
actually
hate that.
like pretty dang close. And that's
Yeah.
just like
Yucky.
that's just by what apps you have installed. Google can make good guesses.
Right.
And it's like Steam, it knows like how many hours we've played of every game, like more or less. So yeah.
Right. That stuff terrifies me because number one, I think like a lot of us like to believe that you're like a unique individual, but these systems are actually pretty scarily accurate at guessing it. The other thing that scares me is the people who don't fall into those templates, how then it like reinforces that kind of marginalization through technology where, you know what I mean? Like, okay, this survey is a harmless survey. It's just trying to make some educated guesses that it thinks, Jared, you got a kid.
I do.
I mean, I knew that. It's not like that's the first time.
Three.
Yeah. But anyway, like I think that's what gets scary to me is that when that technology, hey buddy, is using is trying to make educated guesses, but then doing it in a way that can be harmful or lead to the marginalization of people who like don't fit into those. It's a bad world when everything is just averages. You know what I mean?
Yep. I feel you.
That's what I'm trying to say. So be scared of technology.
Be scared.
Uninstall everything.
Skynet
Unplug your computer.
But also be happy because Jared's kid is doing like, what is that, a chicken wing dance?
Chicken.
Yeah.
My boys and their friends decided being a chicken is a really funny thing.
At least he's not flossing.
The purity.
Chickens and Minecraft.
At least it's not
Love
Fortnite.
Hey, now.
Does he know anything Fortnite, Jared?
No, I have not taught my kids anything about Fortnite.
Keep him pure.
That's right.
But we're running out of time. I'll save the questions y'all gave me this week in the club. Thanks for those, and we'll roll them over to next week. I realize that we talk a lot more than we used to now. It's good though. It's usually a good sign of a good conversation. But if you don't know what I'm talking about when I mentioned the club, go to club.pcgamer.com to find out more. It's just a small subscription service, gets you an invite to our Discord where you can ask questions, priority questions for the show. We usually ask them and take them from Twitch chat too, but again, not enough time. If you want to catch the show after the fact, you can find us here every week at 1 p.m. Pacific time every Wednesday, and that's at twitch.tv/PCGamer. You can catch us after the fact at youtube.com/PCGamer for the VOD, or you can go to pcgamer.com/tag/podcast to find us the links to our iTunes, our RSS feed, Anchor.fm, Spotify, Google Play, anywhere you want to listen to podcasts, you can get those links there, or just search in the store. And if you are listening to us on iTunes, please just drop a rating. Just drop a rating if you can. Leave a review if you've got a couple extra seconds, and let us know what you think. It really helps us kind of surface the new podcast, and will hopefully help us catch up to the previous feed, which still exists. And if you are listening and you're not on iTunes but want to listen on iTunes, make sure you search for the PC Gamer Show and not PC Gamer Podcast. This is a new iTunes feed. We're starting over because the old one is built on a dusty
lies and deception,
rotten scaffold.
Juice strings and bubblegum.
So yeah, that's gonna do it for us today. Again, we'll see you next week, and hopefully have some interesting stuff to talk about. There's always interesting stuff to talk about. Video games don't quit anymore. They just don't. They don't quit. They don't ever give us a break, which is kind of a good thing, kind of a terrifying thing. Yeah. Until then, what do we say? What do we say, fellas? Don't forget to
game on.
Game on.
Game on. Hey, let's talk like a chicken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, everybody. That's gonna do it for us today. See you next week. Bye bye.